Chapter 321 The strongest member of the body sect. There was a loud crunch, and a huge crack appeared in the ice. It looked like Chen Lu was about to break out from the ice. Huo Yuao's expression turned serious, and he swiped his right hand. The complete version of the dark golden terraclaws was unleashed. No one could compare to him in terms of capturing the perfect timing. Just as the dark golden lights from his terraclaws arrived, the ice broke apart, and Chen Lu escaped. Chen Lu was instantly greeted with the extremely sharp blades. Chen Lu had no other choice. His fifth soul ring lit up. He used his fifth soul skill once again, the three-legged dragon toad. He had obtained this soul skill after hunting and killing a 10,000-year three-legged dragon toad. When he used this soul skill, he could create another leg for his body soul. As he released a light barrier from his three-legged dragon toad, he could protect himself and greatly increase his fighting strength. Among the same generation disciples of the body sect, his fifth soul ring was the best among all the soul rings at the same level. He was recognized to have the strongest fifth soul ring in the entire body sect. Gaining 5 rings and attaining this ability before he was 18 years old was why he could represent the body sect in this tournament. At the same time, he was being nurtured as one of the future elites of the sect. Chen Lu, who wanted to get up and slammed, was smacked back to the ground. Although his three-legged dragon toad blocked the attack of the dark golden terraclaws, the terraclaws were still the dark golden terraclaw bear's greatest ability. It was extremely destructive and wasn't inferior to Huo Yuao's strongest version of the unparalleled chill. 5 enormous cracks appeared on the barrier, and the effect of the 10,000-year soul skill was instantly destroyed. Chen Lu was so devastated that he almost spat blood. Huo Yuao had no intention of letting him off. He retracted his terraclaws and clenched his fist. A bright golden light extended from his body. Following this, he punched out at Chen Lu. Sovereign's Descent. This was the Sovereign's Descent formed after Huo Yuao fused his spiritual power and various abilities together. He had already evolved the dragon god Billo's skill into his own version. Chen Lu cursed in his heart, and a layer of golden light was released from his body. He had already used his three-legged dragon toad twice, and it wasn't feasible for him to use it a third time. As his soul power rapidly dipped, he had no choice but to activate his own invincible barrier. Ripples formed on the barrier as the blow slammed against it, but it gave Chen Lu an opportunity to catch his breath. He quickly channeled power into his legs and sprang up from the depression he was in. With how strong his legs were, he immediately flew high into the sky. Chen Lu was clearly aware of his greatest strength, which was his speed. However, he had been completely suppressed by Huo Yuao during their confrontations. His speed advantage couldn't be realized. After using his fifth soul skill twice and initiating the second awakening of his body soul, he had already used up more power than Wang Yanfeng had earlier. Time wasn't on his side. Chen Lu hated Huo Yuao a lot right now. It was his first fight in the entire tournament. His teammates and Princess Wei Nao were watching him. How could he lose to a cripple? He flipped around in the air, and his energy flow smoothed out. Although he was affected by the chill from the ultimate ice, he managed to repress this chill using his cultivation. He took a deep breath and seemed to grow larger. His legs expanded, and the greenish bronze projection flashed behind his back again. This time, Chen Lu had completely locked onto Huo Yuao. Having jumped high into the air, he came swiftly crashing back down. He couldn't differentiate between Huo Yuao's illusions, so he wanted to use his speed so that Huo Yuao didn't have any opportunity to use his illusory tricks. This time, Huo Yuao couldn't dodge the incessant attacks anymore. He looked up at his opponent in the sky and raised his right arm to block his body. A ring of distorted ripples was released from an ordinary-looking ring on one of his right-hand fingers. This ring of ripples changed into a gentle, milky white shield that protected him. Subtle golden patterns appeared on the shield. In order to prevent himself from being displaced, Chen Lu came down with only his physical body. His legs, which were now more than 2 meters long, appeared deformed. It was as if 2 bronze pillars were descending from the sky and crashing down. When the 2 bronze pillars struck Huo Yuao's shield, there was a massive boom as a ball of greenish bronze light surged and blew apart, with Huo Yuao at the center of the explosion. It felt as if a huge hammer had fallen from the sky and pounded the stage. The surrounding floor collapsed, and a terrifying destructive force caused countless fissures to extend across the stage floor. A figure shot back into the sky, and a bronze light started to undulate tremendously. As his screams echoed out, the figure that shot into the sky spat out fresh blood. As the bronze light dispersed, it became clear that the figure belonged to Chen Lu. The tremendous explosion caused debris to fly everywhere. As Chen Lu was driven back, Huo Yuao's figure also became clear amid the debris. Rings of white surrounded his body and made it seem as if he were in a fairy tale. Layers and layers of glowing light undulated around his shield, as if they were shaking. Beneath him, there was an area 1.5 meters in diameter that hadn't collapsed at all. He managed to block Chen Lu's all-out attack. Chen Lu crashed down. When he landed on the ground, his calves had already returned to normal. However, he fell on his butt and grabbed his legs with both his hands while screaming in pain. Right now, it was very clear that his calves were in very unnatural shapes. Evidently, he was gravely injured. Huo Yuao shut his eyes and sensed the surging life aura in his body. Through his spiritual force, he asked in some concern, "Brother Skydream, how are you?" He had used the life-reflecting shield to resist Chen Lu's attack. It was the strength the Skydream Iceworm had conferred onto Huo Yuao after he turned into a spirit. Even though the Skydream Iceworm didn't have 4 orange gold soul rings like the Snow Empress, he was still a million-year soul beast. Although his blood couldn't compare to the Snow Empress, he was still the only soul beast in the continent to reach a million-year cultivation. The greatest strength of the life-reflecting shield was that it could reflect an attack after absorbing the impact of an attack. Once the attack was reflected onto the opponent, the harm that was inflicted on the opponent would be equivalent to the strength fed to Skydream Iceworm's body to restore the defensive strength of the shield. In the close combat that had just occurred, Chen Lu's all-out attack on the life-reflecting shield was fed back into his calves. How could he not be seriously injured? However, the Skydream Iceworm didn't have it easy against this attack either. He had indeed absorbed a huge amount of life power to replenish his own body, but he had also absorbed the entire impact of the attack, as he didn't have Huo Yuao's soul power to support him. As a result, he bore the entire attack, which was stronger than an attack from a 7-ringed soul sage using his martial soul true body, all on his own. I'm fine. The life power is very concentrated. However, I'll need some time to absorb it. At least, within 15 minutes, I'm unable to help you resist an attack of such a level again. Deal with it yourself. After hearing the Skydream Iceworm's words, Huo Yuao heaved a sigh of relief. He couldn't use his own soul power to increase the defensive strength of the life-reflecting shield. However, he had to conserve his energy in the individual elimination round. He could only exploit the Skydream Iceworm's strength. With Chen Lu's cultivation, it was impossible for him to truly damage the life-reflecting shield. The Skydream Iceworm only needing 15 minutes to recover was already beyond Huo Yuao's expectations. As light shot out above his shoulders, Huo Yuao was propelled over the depression. The unbreakable Billow was already in front of Chen Lu. After checking out his condition, he immediately gestured to signal the end of the fight. Second individual elimination round. Huo Yuao from the Tang sect wins. Everyone from the Snow Demon sect went silent in the waiting area. Wang Yanfeng jumped onto the stage and carried the critically injured Chen Lu down. After a brief inspection, he discovered that Chen Lu's calves had broken into 3 parts. It wasn't just an injury to his physical body, it was also an injury to his martial soul. He was highly unlikely to be able to compete in the team round. Fortunately, Chen Lu wasn't weak, and his calves were quite strong. Although they were fractured, his passageways weren't seriously hurt. After his teammates helped set his broken bones, he was in much less pain. Wei Nao personally used her Snow Lotus to help him recover. Even if he couldn't compete today, he could still recover within a week under her treatment, based on his control of his martial soul. Chen Lu's injury wasn't a big deal. However, what were they going to do in the following fights? Huo Yuao had already won 2 fights. The Soul Emperors from the Tang sect had yet to compete. If this continued, the Snow Demon sect was going to be in an extremely disadvantageous situation. Wei Nao furrowed her brow. At this point, a cold-looking young man stood from the Snow Demon sect stood up and said, "Let me go." Wei Nao was stunned. As her gaze met his, the young man nodded at her. His body flashed, and he was already up on the stage. When Zhang Zan announced Huo Yuao's victory, Huo Yuao was already making use of the time to restore his soul power. However, he felt his hair rising when this young man from the Snow Demon sect appeared on the stage. It gave him the same feeling as the time when the Skydream Iceworm hit the Ice Empress in the extreme north. A soul master who was at most 20 years old actually gave him this sense of oppression, as if he were being watched by a savage beast. Evidently, this young man's cultivation was quite high. Huo Yuao focused his gaze and circulated his spiritual power to dispel that sense of oppression as he stared back at his opponent. This young man from the Snow Demon sect was tall and burly. All of his muscles were well-defined and toned. He stood almost 2 meters tall, and his shoulders were quite broad. His hair was split between half brown and half red, both sides of which appeared very soft. His eyes were narrow and long, and contained a cold, indifferent look. His nose was straight. Although he wasn't especially attractive, he was still slightly charming. Oddly, his skin was white, smooth, and glowed. When he raised his hands, his skin appeared very delicate. A strong opponent. Who Are You Out immediately had this thought. He had the feeling that this guy was probably the strongest opponent he faced in the tournament thus far. He might not even be able to beat him if he was in peak condition. Had the body sect finally sent their team leader up after losing 2 consecutive fights? The young man didn't rush to the center of the stage like the others had to reduce the time Hu Yuao had to restore his soul power. Instead, he slowly approached Hu Yuao. However, every step that he took increased the sense of oppression that he gave off. His aura also gradually started to grow. Hu Yuao's expression changed slightly. With his acute senses, he was able to immediately sense how frightening his opponent was. His opponent's soul and spiritual power had reached a natural and seamless stage of fusion that was superior to even his own. Hu Yuao's spiritual power was still greater than this young man's, but his soul power was weaker. When he fused them together, there were naturally some inequalities. Contrary to this, the feeling that his opponent gave him was one where his soul power and spiritual power couldn't be differentiated anymore. They seemed to be a single entity. Hu Yuao had only experienced something like this from Elder Mu. Elder Mu had once told him that anyone who managed to do something like this had the potential to become a transcendent Duo. If not, one's limit would be becoming a titled Duo, no matter how great his talent and martial soul were. Taking a deep breath, Hu Yuao calmed himself down. He looked at his opponent with a burning gaze and revealed a dim layer of golden light in his eyes. Soon afterwards, this layer of light quickly covered his entire body. A pure undulation comprised of his spiritual power surged towards his opponent. I might be inferior to you in terms of my fusion of soul and spiritual power, therefore I'll use my superior spiritual power to clash against you. He couldn't lose to his opponent in terms of his aura. The tall and burly young man revealed a shocked expression. He stopped in his tracks momentarily, before continuing to walk towards Hu Yuao. Zhang Zan didn't stop them from staring at each other. Rather, he was astonished. He could clearly tell that these two young men in front of him had surpassed him in certain realms, despite their inferior cultivations. Was this the standard that most outstanding soul masters of the younger generation could achieve? Zhang Zan was certain that they'd surpass him in the future so long as they were given sufficient time to mature and improve further. When the burly young man reached Hu Yuao, their clashing auras peaked. Even Hu Yuao's wheelchair revealed a dim golden glow. Hu Yuao seemed a little pale. His eyes had turned almost pure gold at this point, and even his hair had been dyed golden. However, his opponent still seemed as calm as ever. Back in the waiting area, everyone from the Tang sect was shocked. They all knew Hu Yuao very well. Based on the situation on stage, it seemed like Hu Yuao was at a disadvantage despite not being suppressed by his opponent's aura. This burly young man must be quite strong. Both parties, please give your names, Zhang Zan said. Tang sect, Hu Yuao. They were only a simple few words, but Hu Yuao struggled to simply mutter them. The pressure bearing down on him was simply too great. Snow Demon sect, Long Ocean. The young man said, both parties, please step back and prepare for the start of the fight. Long Ocean nodded at Hu Yuao, not attempting to hide the admiration in his eyes in the slightest. He then turned around and walked to his spot. Even though the stage had been heavily damaged, he didn't seem to care or notice. As he crossed the fissures that littered the ground, there seemed to be an aura around him that carried his body over them. He crossed them like they weren't even there. When he turned around again, the aura and sense of oppression that he'd been directing towards Hu Yuao disappeared. Hu Yuao's spiritual power surged forward, but seemed to find nothing. His opponent was obviously right in front of him, yet his spiritual power had completely lost its target. Hu Yuao groaned, and a hint of red surfaced on his face. However, he stopped himself from spitting out the fresh blood that had filled his throat. Strong. Hu Yuao was sure that he'd met the greatest opponent in his life thus far. The body sect deserved to be known as the most mysterious and powerful sect in the continent. Long Ocean's cultivation was on another level compared to his own. He had to be the team leader of the body sect. Hu Yuao took a deep breath to calm the surging blood and energy in his body. After a moment, he slowly pushed his wheelchair towards his own spot. Back in the waiting area, Wang Donga looked at Bei Bei anxiously. Bei Bei shook his head at her and said, "Don't worry, he knows his limits. We have to trust him. This Long Ocean is going to be a tough nut to crack. Sanchi, you should start preparing." "Yes." Shu Sanchi looked at him. After years of brotherhood, he immediately understood what Bei Bei meant by the look in his eyes. Hu Yuao retreated to his side of the stage and turned his wheelchair around. He grabbed the handle with his right hand and pulled himself up even straighter. Long Ocean was facing him again, but the aura from his body wasn't nearly as strong as before. Despite this, he seemed to have fused with the stage where he stood. Unity of heaven and man. Had his cultivation reached such a level? Hu Yuao's eyes lit up. This was the level that he was pursuing. It wasn't just him. In the resting area, Ji Juigan's eyes also brightened. Both he and Hu Yuao had very high goals when it came to their fighting techniques. No one else could compare to them in this aspect. It was also because of this that they were more intrigued when they saw Long Ocean's current condition. Zhang Zan gestured as he shouted, "Begin." Hu Yuao quickly lifted his head. Instantly, his eyes brightened and 5 soul rings surged upwards from his body. Following this, 2 streaks of purplish gold light shot out of his eyes towards his opponent. He wasn't going to hold back anymore. After winning 2 consecutive fights, his soul and spiritual power had been greatly depleted. This third round would be a huge test for him. Hu Yuao's first soul ring shone brightly, a hint of white hidden amidst the glow. Now that he'd increased his spiritual power to its limit, his imitation wasn't able to conceal the true color of his soul rings anymore. 2 streaks of purplish gold light swept through the air and instantly reached Long Ocean. Long Ocean didn't move from his position and made a weird gesture in front of his chest. He raised his right palm towards the left and curled his fingers. He then raised his left palm towards the front with his fingers straightened. As he did this, he released a shiny glow from his body. Surrounded by the glow, he seemed to have become a jade sculpture. When Hu Yuao's spiritual shock arrived, Long Ocean's sculpted body lit up with a blinding purplish gold light. Following this, it disappeared. His body swayed a little, followed by the shiny glow on his body dispersing. On the other side, Hu Yuao let out a muffled groan, and he seemed very grim. He hadn't gained any advantage from this attack. However, he was slightly excited by how Long Ocean had resisted his attack. He could sense that Long Ocean had fused his spiritual and soul power with his entire body and then fused it with the heaven and earth to resist his attack. Such an experience and sensation were very enlightening to Hu Yuao. This was the realm that he'd been searching for. This was the direction that he'd been working towards after he entered the concrete immaterial realm. If he could achieve a breakthrough and enable his spiritual and soul power to fuse with his body, his cultivation, physical strength, and control could rise to yet another level. Such a live experience was incredibly valuable for him. At the same time, his opponent's strength was also stimulating Hu Yuao's own potential. Long Ocean was stunned after resisting this attack. He gently pressed his feet against the ground and seemed to slide across the ground towards Hu Yuao. Soul rings started to rise from beneath his feet. Yellow, purple, purple, black, 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 black. 7 soul rings of the best combination, out of which 4 were 10,000-year soul rings. This number had only been achieved by Wang Donga in the Tang sect, apart from Hu Yuao, who was special. However, Wang Donga was still 1 level lower than Long Ocean in terms of cultivation. Hu Yuao finally understood why the sense of oppression from his opponent had been so strong. Long Ocean's abilities had reached an unprecedented level. 7 rings. He was a soul sage. Long Ocean wasn't the only soul sage in this tournament. There had also been the 3-legged golden toad, Xia Hingchen. However, everyone from the Tang sect could tell that Xia Hingchen had gained his 7-ring cultivation through both medicine and some other special methods. He might even have sacrificed his future improvements as well as overstimulated his current potential in order to have become a soul sage in time for the tournament. Was Long Ocean the same? Definitely not. As a disciple of the body sect, how could he possibly reach such the unity of heaven and man realm through medicine? His cultivation was achieved through his own hard work and effort. Such a soul sage from the body sect, was very scary. His 4 10,000-year soul rings were even superior to the unbreakable duo beside him. Zhang Zan only had 4 10,000-year soul rings. The body sect actually had such a strong individual among their ranks. The expression of everyone from Tang sect changed. Even Shu Tianran, Jing Hingchen and the mysterious Imperial Chu tutor were all affected when they saw Long Ocean's 7 soul rings. Their auras started to undulate. Before Long Ocean had surfaced, Wang Qi was recognized as the strongest in this tournament. Her fighting strength was the best. However, those who were sharp could tell that Long Ocean was superior to Wang Qi even before he made a move. They just didn't know what his martial soul was. 100 meters was nothing to Long Ocean. He took only a second to move this distance. He didn't perform any superfluous actions or unleash any of his soul skills. He raised his right hand and mimicked the pressing action towards Huo Yuao. Suddenly, the entire stage started to gently shake. Huo Yuao sensed that his opponent wasn't just Long Ocean, but the air within the protective barriers around the stage. Even the sunlight became a part of his opponent's attack. Even though nothing weird had happened yet, Huo Yuao felt a huge change occurring. Was this a fighting technique in the realm of unity of heaven and man? Huo Yuao's eyes brightened. Even Long Ocean was a little stunned. He wondered why Huo Yuao wasn't fearful or panicky, but excited. Huo Yuao raised his right hand and formed a fist, then shuddered slightly. Following this, a golden projection separated from his body. He also turned golden, just like a golden sculpture. This golden projection was slender, although it was illusory. Her appearance made Long Ocean feel that the pressure he was putting on Huo Yuao was being borne by this projection. She looked a little familiar. 3 pairs of wings opened behind her, and her long hair flowed. She punched with her right hand and blocked Long Ocean's palm. Plop! There was no tremendous collision. When both parties contacted each other, Long Ocean's attack seemed to have been retracted. The fist of the golden projection also developed an indescribable, whirlpool-like glow that seemed able to engulf everything. 2 beams of light, golden and white jade, blew apart after a momentary silence. They changed into 2 light barriers that stuck close to each other as they rippled. Huo Yuao seemed to really become a statue as he sat in his wheelchair. There wasn't a single change in him. The golden projection in front of him was also crushed as the beams of light blew apart. Long Ocean didn't move a single inch. However, there was a look of shock in his eyes. It was definitely not a soul skill. It was a fighting technique. What fighting technique was it? It wasn't the sovereign's descent that Huo Yuao had inherited from the dragon god Duo. Even with Long Ocean's cultivation, he couldn't continue to advance as they clashed. In the next instant, the golden projection reformed. She retracted her left hand and extended her right hand. As she tugged and pulled, a pure golden whirlpool with a diameter of around 1 foot flew out from the hands of the golden projection, barreling towards Long Ocean. Long Ocean took a step back and raised his right arm. His palm straightened like a blade. Suddenly, his entire arm and body turned a jade color. Behind him, a twisted blade formed by compressed air lit up and slashed. There was a deafening screech in the air. The golden whirlpool was destroyed, but the jade blade light was also crushed. This time, Long Ocean retreated half a step again, whereas Huo Yuao was bleeding from his nose and mouth. While it seemed like a simple collision, it was actually more dangerous and scary than using soul skills. After the golden projection was crushed again, Huo Yuao's face was already completely pale. He retracted his right arm to his chest before pushing it out again. The golden projection took form again. This time, the projection clasped her palms before her chest. An austere aura was released. Long Ocean's expression turned serious. After entering the realm of unity of heaven and man, his senses were probably superior to Huo Yuao's, even if his spiritual power wasn't comparable. His sense of crisis was especially acute. When that golden projection took form in front of Huo Yuao again, Long Ocean only felt his heart shrinking. After that, his heart beat extremely quickly, and he started perspiring profusely. Even with his cultivation, he still broke out in a cold sweat. It was as if he were being targeted by a venomous snake that could kill him with one bite. How's it possible? How's it possible? His cultivation is definitely below mine. He has also been greatly exhausted. Why is he giving me such a feeling? Although Long Ocean was shocked, he didn't slow down. He pointed his toes to the ground and he flicked backward. At the same time, his arms drew a huge circle in front of his body. His entire body turned jade white, and his complexion glowed. Behind him, a silver white human figure quickly took form. It was the second awakening of his body soul. It was a silver ranked awakening. In fact, LMU wasn't even sure whether the second awakening of body souls in the body sect could evolve. The highest level of second awakening right now was the white salva level. Only a person with his second awakening in the white salva level could transcend the level of a tidal duo and evolve to the gold level. Huo Yuao's judgment was very accurate. Long Ocean was the strongest among the younger generation in the body sect. He was likely to inherit the position of the leader of the body sect in the future. His status in the body sect was very high. It was even superior to many elders. After seeing Long Ocean's second awakening of his body soul, everyone from the Snow Demon sect in the waiting area couldn't help but stand up. They didn't understand why he would do this even though he was at an advantage. At this point, the projection in front of Huo Yuao's body moved. She swept her clasped palms forward, and a thin, golden light shot out. Wherever the light passed, no ripples were created. Not even a sound could be heard. Without looking carefully, it was almost impossible to detect it. At least no spectator was able to see this golden light. It even seemed to absorb the light that it refracted. Long Ocean had a grave look on his face. When the golden light flashed, even his soul felt a piercing pain. This was an attack that he couldn't possibly dodge. He refused to use an invincible barrier to protect himself. As the strongest individual in the younger generation of the body sect, he was a firm believer that martial souls were still stronger than soul tools. The protective white light around Long Ocean's body was like a rubber ball that had been pricked. It instantly blew apart and turned into a white glow that quickly dispersed. He groaned and shuddered. The white lights around his body started to surge. Huo Yuao wasn't in the best condition on the other side either. After unleashing this attack, the projection in front of him instantly dimmed and disappeared. He was very pale and was relying on his wheelchair to keep himself from collapsing. He was panting, and the light in his spirit eyes had also dimmed slightly. However, he was still staring at his opponent. He sighed in his heart. It was his first time using this ultimate technique. However, the result, Plop. Long Ocean's body started to jerk tremendously, and he spat out blood. The blood that he spat out was a little weird. After spitting it out, it immediately changed into countless blood arrows that scattered and let out a series of sizzles. As it landed on the ground, it formed small holes, but the depth of these holes couldn't be determined. His body jerked slightly, and he also looked slightly pale. When he looked at Huo Yuao again, his expression was very serious. He lifted his right hand, and a milky white glow appeared. Brother Long is hurt. Everyone from the Snow Demon sect was astonished. It seemed like he was in rather bad shape. They also didn't expect Huo Yuao to weaken Long Ocean at the last moment. I concede defeat. Huo Yuao's weak voice sounded. He signaled towards Sengzan. After winning 2 consecutive fights, Huo Yuao finally lost to the most outstanding youth from the body sect. Although Long Ocean didn't use his full abilities in this fight, he was still hurt by Huo Yuao's last attack. Wang Donga rushed up the stage immediately. She came to Huo Yuao's side, and he smiled at her to show that he was fine. When Wang Donga was about to push him off the stage, Long Ocean suddenly said, "Wait a minute." Huo Yuao twisted his head to look at him. Wang Donga's eyes were filled with caution and hostility. Long Ocean's abilities were beyond what they had expected. Long Ocean looked at Huo Yuao with a deep gaze. "Can I ask if the golden projection was a fighting technique that you invented?" Huo Yuao slowly nodded. Long Ocean said, "You are strong. Among those of the same generation, you are the most creative opponent I've met. It's a pity that your body is restricting your abilities. Otherwise, you'd probably be the strongest opponent I've ever met. If there's a day you can stand up, I hope to fight you in your best state." Huo Yuao smiled. "You'll have that opportunity." When he said that, his eyes seemed to be dazzling. He had given his all in this fight and curved his opponent several times. However, he still fell short in the end. But there was still the team round. More importantly, he hadn't revealed all his trump cards. Otherwise, what were they going to do against the Holy Ghost sect? Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.